Good morning, Chair Wygant, members of the board. Becky Regan from the County Executive Office to introduce your next item, the 2021 Wildfire Preparedness and Mitigation Update. Before we get started on the presentation, we'd like to acknowledge two county staff who are new to this policy area. Carrie Timmer, the county's Regional Forest Health Coordinator. Carrie joined the county about a month ago and will work under the direction of Ag Commissioner Josh Hunsinger. She brings an extensive background working with state, federal, and nonprofit partners in forest management, a critical aspect of wildfire prevention and mitigation. And then also Dave Atkinson, Assistant Director of Emergency Services. Dave is not new to the county, but new to this role. His extensive professional experience in public works as an environmental utilities manager, along with his volunteer experience with Placer County Sheriff's Office Search and Rescue, and serving on Team Rubicon, which is a disaster response non-governmental organization, well qualifies him for this position. So we are fortunate to have both of these highly qualified individuals joining the county's multidisciplinary forest health and wildfire mitigation and management efforts. So with that, I will introduce the presenters of today's annual update. Fire Chief Brian Estes, Sheriff's Captain Shane Wright, and Dave Atkinson. And Dave, I believe you're kicking things off.
So first of all, congratulations to Carrie and Dave, both great choices, I think, and welcome.
Thanks. Over the last year, your board has continued to authorize significant, next slide please, sorry. Significant projects relating to wildfire mitigation. Examples include the fuels management project that's ongoing out at French Meadows, and then of course the tree mortality program that we have been continuing with our local emergency in order to fund the removal of 5,200 hazard trees. However, for today's presentation, I wanted to highlight some of the other perhaps lesser well-known projects in wildfire mitigation that are taking place with your board's support. The National Preparedness Goal outlines 7 core capabilities related to mitigation. Operational coordination is one, and a good example is the fact that you have Placer OES, Placer County Fire, and Placer County Sheriffs with you this morning to provide this presentation as a combined effort. Another one of those core capabilities is community resilience. In this context, community resilience is defined as empowering individuals and communities to make informed risk management decisions necessary to adapt to, withstand, and quickly recover from, thank you, future incidents. This fits well with what we are looking at to accomplish with wildfire, given the fact that wildfires continue to be more frequent, more destructive, and sometimes more costly in lives in California. Let me briefly touch on several examples of the county's efforts to support efforts in this area. The first is the Placer Wildfires Community Program. FireWise is a nationwide program that lays out a multi-step process by which a neighborhood engages in education and mitigation measures that lead to a certification from the National Fire Protection Association. For several years, Placer County has provided a FireWise coordinator to provide outreach, education, and assistance to communities that wish to pursue this certification. Placer has enjoyed good participation in the FireWise program with communities from Dollar Point all the way to Granite Bay. In our next slide, I'll provide actually some of the returns on that investment that you're seeing. I also did want to share just one quick example of a success story that we've had through our FireWise program. There's a FireWise community in the city of Auburn. Through that FireWise community effort, they were actually able to do some coordination with the Union Pacific Railroad, which then allowed for some fire mitigation work to happen on railroad property, which, as most of us know, working on several large projects can be difficult for that kind of coordination. So that's just an example of that type of success. A second is the Fire Safe Councils. This is a California invention. Their goal is to educate homeowners about community wildfire preparedness while working with local fire officials to design and implement projects that increase the wildfire survivability of their communities. Fire Safe Councils frequently pursue grant funding to execute larger projects such as shaded fuel breaks, and many of Placer's 6 Fire Safe Councils have been successful in securing grant funds over the years. Placer OES is exploring the establishment of a 7th Fire Safe Council down in the Gradant Bay area, and we are also working with the Agricultural Commissioner on the formation of a Fire Safe Council centered around the agricultural operations rather than a geographic location. So this graphic is just a quick snapshot of some of the successes and some of the returns on our investment through the Placer County FireWise community. I am pleased to report that Placer County is second in California and the nation in the number of FireWise communities that we currently have certified. And I got an email this morning from our FireWise coordinator that we have 4 more in the queue. So good success there. Another important core capability is public information. As noted on the previous slide, Fire Safe Councils and the Fire Safe Alliance took advantage of a return to in-person outdoor events by supporting the annual wildfire preparedness activities in Forest Hill and Alta. County public information team supported these efforts with media outreach that resulted in coverage from both KCRA and Gold Country Media. As part of the annual Wildfire Preparedness Month campaign, Placer County has engaged in a robust outreach effort in close coordination with our emergency services partners. And examples of these efforts include over 500 informational items were distributed in the recent Auburn Home Show, again, return to in-person events that we took advantage of. Wildfire-related articles have been included in the county's weekly newsletters and have garnered over 62,000 views. County's wildfire-related Facebook posts have accumulated 167,000 impressions, and the PIO team was gracious enough to help me understand that an impression is interaction with some type of post, so whether it's a like or a share or a view. I'm also pleased to announce that several county buses will be sporting bus wraps featuring the Sheriff's Placer Alert logo very soon. In the Tahoe area, partnerships with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association and the short-term rental program help to spread wildfire safety messages, and we are also looking at ways to continue to communicate and promote the Sheriff's Placer Alert program to a larger number of the visitors that come in that area that may not be familiar with the program, so that they can be sure to get those important messages if the need arises. Also, just today, your board approved a resolution supporting the Lake Tahoe Basin Wildfire Awareness Campaign that's being led by North Tahoe Fire Protection District. And of course, OES continues to enhance and improve the VReadyPlacer website, and we're working on actually adding some GIS mapping capabilities that will provide an opportunity for residents who may not be familiar with the Fire Safe Councils and other wildfire education and outreach events to look up things that are close to them. I'll wrap up this morning talking about the core capability of planning by highlighting 2 important mitigation planning efforts that are nearing completion. The Local Hazard Mitigation Plan is a comprehensive document that identifies the specific hazards we face in Placer County and the potential projects and programs that can be undertaken to mitigate those hazards. An important hazard of the Local Hazard Mitigation Plan, or LHMP, is that it provides opportunities for community involvement and input. We are just about to release a public draft of the document for public review, and we will also be following it up with a public meeting to elicit additional public input. This document is critical as it provides the basis and is often a requirement to obtain grant funding for mitigation projects. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan is another important planning document, as it also often is a requirement to obtain wildfire-related grant funding. Public input is obtained with the help of the Fire Safe Councils, and we are working with them to develop a comprehensive project list. With the support of CAL FIRE, we have been able to conduct a survey that has already achieved a 3-fold increase in responses compared to the previous Community Wildfire Protection Plan update. And we would encourage all Placer County residents to take advantage of the survey. Both of these important plans will be brought back to your board for adoption later this year. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your report. You mentioned bus routes. Can you expand on that, or did I misunderstand?
Bus wraps.
Bus wraps, oh, okay.
So it's a fancy way of saying we're going to put some cool logos on the bus.
Okay, I thought you were going to send buses out to take people when they're back.
Big stickers.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, good morning, Chair Wygant, members of the board. I'm Brian Estes. I'm the State and County Fire Chief. And first and foremost, I want to thank Dave and welcome him on behalf of the fire department. Welcome him to part of our emergency services team here in Placer County. We're very happy to have him. So I'm going to follow up and talk a little bit about reflections on our fire season from 2020 and what we're looking at moving into 2021 in our preparatory efforts. So, you know, we were faced obviously with the pandemic and some of the challenges that came with that, but as you can see by some of our statistics, I don't really think that COVID had a direct reflection on our emergency response or the impact to the state of California from emerging and threatening wildfires. In the state responsibility areas across California, we had almost 10,000 wildland fires within the state. That accounted, as part of our total response out of CAL FIRE's mission of about 230,000 emergency responses statewide. About 10,000 of those were wildland fires. You know, thankfully, most of those don't make the front page of the newspaper, and that's a credit to our regional response with all our state, local, county, district fire agencies that are all part of that regionalized response. But last year was a record year. In fact, it was the most disastrous fire season recorded in California history. As you can see there, we had over 4.2 million acres burned. That was not just in state responsibility area, but also the acres that were impacted on National Forest System lands. Over 10,000 structures were burned or destroyed, and we had 33 fatalities that were directly related in some manner to the fires. As I said, 2020 was recorded as the worst fire season in California's history. So bringing it down regionally to Placer County, across our unit on the state side and the Nevada Yuba Placer unit, those three counties, we had 990 wildland fires across our entire unit. In Placer County, we had 341 wildland fires that we and our allied agencies responded to. Placer County has about 367,000 acres of state responsibility area wildland. In County Fire's jurisdiction of 475 square miles, about half of our jurisdiction is state responsibility area, and about half, mostly down in Chair Wygant's district and Supervisor Gore's district, is local responsibility area. But we still treat that in a very consistent manner, and we treat that response the same because of our relationship between the state and the county. That response is consistent whether it's state or local responsibility area. CAL FIRE has a mission of keeping 95% of our fires at 10 acres or less. And I've talked to you about that before, and that's because we don't manage public land. We protect private taxpayers' land. So our mission is very clear, and I would say that we were generally successful in meeting that goal in 2020. We had 14 fires in Placer County that grew greater than 10 acres. The remainder of those we were able to keep at less than 10 acres, or what we call initial attack status. It's about a 95.8% success rate, which I look at positively given the nature of last year. So what does our forecasted weather conditions look like? I think you've probably all seen the news. You've seen forecasted snowpack, drought conditions. There's a lot of language right now out there hitting the news every morning and every evening. Our May 1st snowpack, I think this is an interesting statistic. May 1st, our snowpack was about 55 to 59%, and this is generally in the northern region, Oregon border down to about Lake Tahoe. As of a couple days ago, it was down to around 23%. So as I talked to you earlier, I knew there was going to be a real sharp drop. We tend to see that high snowpack in April, and if there's not any late April or early May storms, we just see that real sharp drop off. So it's not totally abnormal, other than we don't have the gross amount of snowpack to deflect that runoff. And our rivers are running high right now, and the snow melt is really going to be gone, I think, by probably mid-June. There's parts of Central California that are already registering 0% at the higher elevations, below Yosemite, etc. So as you can see, we've not had really any spring rains to speak of. Our grass loading, because of that, is, I would say, average. You know, last couple of years I've talked to you, we've had these tremendous grass crops. This year I would say it's more moderate, which you could look as a positive as far as carrying fire spread. We do have another potential for monsoonal flow into the summer months that's predicted, meaning lightning. Whether that's dry lightning or wet lightning is yet to be predicted. And generally speaking, our burning conditions we're seeing right now are about 3 months ahead of where I would expect to see them as far as soil moisture, fuel moisture, et cetera. So for us locally here on the county and state side in Placer County, I suspended burning on the 24th, this last Monday. We will go to peak staffing on June 1st on the state side. County side obviously is always at full preparedness level, full staffing levels. On the state side, once we get to that full peak staffing, we will have our 411 state-funded personnel across the 3 counties, 22 frontline engines, 5 reserves, our 5 Type 1 hand crews. We did increase our capabilities this year a little bit by adding a 4th dozer. Right now it's stationed at Auburn headquarters. We actually have 2 dozers at Auburn headquarters, but we'll be routinely moving that to the east side to Truckee as fire conditions and red flag forecasts predict. And then our aircraft will come on at Grass Valley Air Attack Base in and around the 1st. Looking statewide at our updates and preparedness levels, probably the biggest thing that we should all be concerned about is that our inmate firefighting hand crew program has literally been decimated across the state. Our peak capacity of inmate firefighting hand crews sits normally at about 160 crews, numbering about 15 to 17 men per crew. Right now, statewide, we're down to 80. Here locally, I only have 2 left, and those crews are running at 13 and 14 per crew, and those are out of Nevada County. Our 3C Center here in Christian Valley is still strong, but again, fielding only 2 crews.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes, Bonnie?
So does that have to do with the reduction of people who are incarcerated?
Yes, absolutely. A myriad of things that have presented over the last few years, but at the end of the day, it's the inmate population that CDCR can provide to us for our fire crew camps has diminished significantly.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what do we do? You know what? We have this problem in front of us. How do we mitigate that issue? So like I said, I've added a 4th dozer to the unit. We'll see a much more aggressive mechanized response out of that. We have added our Firefighter 1 hand crews across the state, but as you can imagine, the difference between professional firefighter crews versus inmate crews, it's very, very expensive, and it doesn't just flip the switch overnight. We are not staffing a Firefighter 1 crew in our unit this year, unfortunately. We did have one last year at Auburn, but we are not funded for one this year. We do have the California National Guard crew stationed at Station 20 in Nevada City. That's the center of our unit, so they will be readily available and are oftentimes initial attack to fires here in Placer County. On the aviation side, more positively, we're going to see 8, and actually this morning I just found out we're going to see a total of 9 by probably later fire season, 9 of our new S-70I Blackhawks in service flying. I've witnessed them, I've seen them in action on some of our early season fires, and they are a force to be reckoned with. They are so much more capable than our venerable Huey fleet, and really going to be an impact to us from the aviation side. And then of course our initial attack and heavy air tanker fleet is slated to be in service as predicted. So on the east side, I wanted to talk a little bit about some success stories we have. I just was with Chief Celine at Truckee last week, and we were reflecting on the year-round staffing that we have committed to at Station 50 there with Truckee Fire Protection District, and what that's done not only to the mutual aid response, but to our fuel reduction efforts up there. We've had, just in the last year, our crews have burned over 700 piles, treating over 58 acres of land in the Truckee Basin, 97 hazard trees felled in high-density egress and evacuation areas. And like I said earlier, we will be routinely moving that 4th dozer to Truckee during forecasted red flag conditions. Our fuel reduction efforts here on the West Slope have been significant over the last year or two. Our phase 1 for the North Fork shaded fuel break is complete. The state committed about $3.5 million to that direct funding from the priority projects between 2019 and the end of 2020. Phase 2 is in the planning phase right now. We're working closely with the RCD. They did apply for an $11 million grant. Those grant applications just went in, so it's unknown as to whether they'll be successful with that or not, but we are supporting them. Frankly, I'll tell you the grant funding is way down from where it was in 2019, largely due to the impacts from COVID, and that is what we're being told. But we were successful in treating over 800 acres of private land, and we will be heavily engaging in prescribed fire. This last winter presented some challenges with prescribed fire. It was just a little too dry to have those good windows, but we will be re-engaging in fall of 2021 in that.
And then Brian, could I ask,
Yeah.
you said grant funding was down? I just would have thought the opposite with the massive amounts of monies that have been put forth
Recovered.
in a range of ways. So could you drill down on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, Supervisor, great question. So I think when we go back to 2019 and the 30 priority projects, there was specific money. Some of that was grant funded, some of it was executive order money that was funded directly into those projects. The pandemic hit, and there was forecasted reductions in cuts, including salary benefit cuts, et cetera. And grant funding was one of those things that got cut, specifically in late 2020 and in early 21. Now, the second grant cycle that just ended on the 19th of this month for submittal, we are hoping that they are going to infuse that money back into the grant cycle. And you know, I don't have a definitive answer for you on that, but we are being told that there's a potential for them to infuse money back into the grant system. So we have applied with the RCD for $11 million for Placer County, and we're going to push really hard in that review process for that.
Yeah, thanks. And if you could just keep us posted on that, how
I
that
will.
emerges, maybe we could hook up with our resources and
Yeah.
amplify that effort more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So just to kind of finish up and bring it down as I transition to Captain Wright here, and Placer County Fire specific to our response out of our county fire department. And I'm going to talk about this next month when I come back to you with our renewal for our cooperative agreement. But you know, our calls for service continue to go up every year, anywhere from about 3 to 5%. This last year we ran over 11,000 calls for service, 58,000 people within our 475 square miles, and about $6.7 billion in assessed value. So the folks were very, very busy. Just our Placer County resources alone responded to over 750 wildland fires, both in jurisdiction and mutual aid. Our red flag warning program, I think, was very successful, and we continue to work with allied agencies on that. And as I turn it over to Captain Wright, I think he'll talk a little bit about some of our combined training efforts and even one that took place last week. And I continue to say that that's probably one of the things here in Placer County that makes us special is our working relationship with the SO. We are really, really joined at the hip in common objectives and consistent messaging when it comes to mitigating emergencies. So with that, thank you very much. Unless there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Captain Shane Wright.
I see no questions at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm Shane Wright with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. On behalf of the Placer County Sheriff's Office, welcome, Dave. You've always been a good partner. We look forward to working with you. So this is about the 4th year that I've been assigned to focus on the emergency management, mass notification, evacuation processes, as well as repopulation. So what I can tell you before I get started here is the sheriff is 100% committed to communication and getting constituents in and out as safely as we possibly can. And as Chief Estes mentioned, we just recently participated with all of the fire partners in Placer County with a unified command training. And basically what this is to ultimately get the cobwebs out from last year as we work into the fire season, basically the relationships, the evacuation process, and transferring intelligence back and forth to figure out the best practices for that specific area that we're working on as far as a hazard mitigation. So This year, and I'm proud to inform the board that, to my knowledge, I think we'll be one of the first ones to apply a GIS component to our social media messaging as well as with the media. So that's going to provide a lot of clarity, and I'm going to jump into that on my last slide. So during that training, our PIO and social media team and dispatchers were also involved, and they were able to work on what we're going to talk about now, which is the evacuation order, warning, and shelter in place. So I think it was the Tubbs Fire in 2017 in Sonoma County, OES, California OES, as well as FireScope, came up with best practices for communication during these catastrophic events. And they came up with evacuation order, evacuation warning, and shelter in place. So basically, that's the only three terms that you're really going to hear. And quite frankly, you're really going to only be seeing and hearing evacuation order and warning as we go forward. And that's the best guideline that we have to follow. And we've adopted it, I think, about 3 years ago, and we've been using it ever since. Just some mass notification tools. We use Everbridge, which is commonly referred to as a reverse 911. It's a third-party contract that we participate in. Placer Alert is basically a tool off of Everbridge. It's the opt-in mass notification. And basically what that'll bring you is text messages, phone calls to your cell phone that normally you wouldn't get. A lot of people have a misconception that Everbridge is going to be able to provide you with mass notification through just Everbridge. And you won't get those on your cell phone unless you opt in with Placer Alert. High-low siren is something we implemented 2 years ago. We've used it a handful of times since we've had it. There's different expectations from county to county, but here in Placer County, the high-low siren is the expectation that is an evacuation order, so leave immediately. Social media platforms, we use all of the ones that we displayed here on the slide. We started a campaign a couple months ago, and from that campaign, we've gained some exposure to some local media. Recently, just Fox 40 put out a great piece on what we're doing to prepare and the different tools that we use. We also use the PA systems, so public announcements through the helicopter and units, the ground units that we have. WIA, so the wireless emergency alert, that's through cell phones. Its capabilities are a little bit in question of what you're going to get to the end user. It's a little bit new and raw, but it's something that we do have access to, and we will use it if need be. And then obviously the door-to-door, which is something that we'll never get away from. So this is a little bit what I was talking about in the beginning. We discovered this late last year on a fire that was running from Lincoln into North Roseville. And basically, that picture you see on the left there is from the dispatch center. It's an Everbridge. In this particular case, it's a Radius. And this fire right here isn't the fire I'm talking about. It was down at the SCU Lightning Complex. But basically, this is exactly what we'll be putting out. And you might have seen it recently on the Magra grass fire we had, I think, a couple weeks ago. It's very successful. It provides a lot more clarity to the public on which zone they're actually in and the status of that zone. As we move further into the incidents, Sheriff's Office GIS personnel is going to be putting together that map you see on the right. It's through our Esri software, and basically you can look at that map. It's clearly marked. There's 3 different zones there, and it provides much more clarity to those that are impacted in that area. If you look there, you have this is the SCU Lightning Complex fire. It burned just shy of 400,000 acres, and you can clearly see that there's repopulation zones that are in green. In yellow, you can see that those areas are under warning, and then on the red, you can see that those areas are under evacuation order. So that's exactly what we're shooting for in the initial stages of an incident. Something that has always been on our plate, we've constantly been working on, is an internal awareness map for all hazards for a planning map. And basically this is for all first responders. You can be from Shasta County or San Diego County and come in and you can get a clear picture of what is going on in this particular case in Colfax. It gives you all the traffic control points, critical infrastructure, all the agency contacts, landmarks, as well as the commonly used frequencies. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Thanks.